When the devil himself falls into Warhammer, he doesn't bring corruption or chaos. He brings something far more dangerous to the Imperium. The truth about what people truly desire in a universe which has exterminated hope. But when Lucifer Morningstar finally stands before the Emperor of Mankind on the Golden Throne, which fallen rebel will prove they were right? The devil who chose freedom, or the Emperor who chose control? The webway portal above Komorog tore open like a wound in reality itself. Not the usual calculated rupture that the Dark Eldar used for their raids, but something violent and uncontrolled. Something wrong. The ancient city of the Dark Eldar, hidden in the spaces between dimensions, had existed for thousands of years without interference from the outside universe. Its spires reached upward into impossible darkness, built from stolen materials and the crystallized screams of countless slaves. In the Arena District, where the wealthy Dark Eldar gathered to watch, prisoners fight and die for entertainment, the sky itself began to bleed light. Archon Vexra stood in his private viewing box, 300 feet above the arena floor. His ancient armor, crafted from the bones of extinct species, clicked softly as he turned to observe the disturbance. Around him, his court of lesser Dark Eldar whispered in their harsh language. They had seen many strange things in their unnaturally long lives, but this phenomenon carried a quality that made even their cold hearts pause with something resembling concern. The light grew brighter, shifting through colors that had no names in any mortal language. Then, something fell through the tier, not a ship or debris, but a figure. A single humanoid form trailing what looked like white feathers that burned away as they descended. The figure fell for nearly a full minute, tumbling through the twisted architecture of Komorog's upper levels, before finally crashing into the center of the arena floor with an impact that cracked the obsidian stones. Silence fell across the arena. 20,000 Dark Eldar stopped their cruel laughter and watched. On the arena floor, among the bodies of slaves who had died in the previous match, the figure stirred. Slowly, impossibly, it stood. He was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, dressed in clothing that seemed completely out of place in this nightmare realm. A perfectly tailored black suit, somehow still pristine despite the fall. Dark hair, styled with careless perfection. And when he looked up at the thousands of faces watching him, his eyes caught the dim light of the arena torches with an amber glow that spoke of something ancient and powerful. Lucifer Morningstar brushed dust from his jacket and looked around with an expression of mild confusion. He took in the twisted architecture, the leering faces in the stands, the bodies scattered around him. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. Not a cruel smile, but one of genuine interest. "Well," he said, his voice carrying across the arena with unnatural clarity despite speaking at normal volume. "This is new." Archon Vexra leaned forward in his seat. In 10,000 years of existence, he had seen many reactions from those who found themselves in the arena. Terror, rage, despair, even defiant courage. But casual curiosity? Never. He gestured to his guards. Within seconds, a dozen Dark Eldar warriors descended on cables from the viewing platforms, their weapons trained on the stranger. They landed in a circle around Lucifer, their splinter rifles humming with toxic ammunition. The lead warrior, her face hidden behind a mask decorated with the screaming faces of her victims, stepped forward. "Kneel, slave," she commanded in Gothic, the common language of the Imperium. "You will be processed and collared. Resistance will be punished with pain that lasts for years." Lucifer tilted his head, studying her with those strange amber eyes. "Slave? No, I don't think so. But I am curious. This place, these people who feed on suffering like it's food. Tell me, what do you truly desire?" The question hung in the air like a physical thing. The warrior felt something shift inside her mind, not an invasion but an invitation. A door opening to a room she had locked away millennia ago. Images flooded her consciousness. Not the torture and cruelty she performed daily, but something else. Something buried so deep she had forgotten it existed. She saw herself in a garden under a sun that no longer existed. Before the fall of her people, before they became the Dark Eldar, she saw herself at peace. The warrior screamed, not in pain, but in horror at the memory of what she had once been. She collapsed to her knees, her weapon falling from nerveless fingers. Around her, the other guards staggered as the psychic feedback from her exposed desire rippled outward. In the stands, Dark Eldar clutched their heads, experiencing emotions they had spent thousands of years trying to forget. Archon, Vexra, felt it too. For just a moment, the iron control he maintained over his own thoughts slipped. He saw his deepest, most shameful desire laid bare. Not power or pain or the screams of slaves. He wanted connection. Real connection with another being. He wanted to be known, truly known, not feared. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Impossible, Vexra whispered. What manner of creature are you? Lucifer looked up at the Archon's viewing box, meeting his eyes across 300 feet of empty air. I'm the devil, actually. Lucifer Morningstar, once the light-bringer of heaven, now just a very confused visitor to your rather depressing dimension. And might I say, your whole torture for sustenance thing is fascinating but terribly inefficient. Have you considered therapy? The casual tone, the impossible claim, the complete lack of fear. It was too much. Vexra gestured sharply. From hidden compartments around the arena, neural collars shot forward on magnetic rails. These devices had enslaved beings of immense power. From orc war bosses to captured space marines, they locked around Lucifer's neck and wrists with metallic clicks. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the collars began to smoke. Warning lights flashed red along their surfaces. The neural spikes that should have driven into Lucifer's nervous system bent and broke against skin that seemed no different from normal flesh. With a sound like breaking glass, all 3 collars shattered simultaneously. Lucifer brushed fragments of metal from his shoulders. Right. I probably should have mentioned. Your technology is impressive. Very dystopian nightmare chic, but it's designed for beings native to this reality. I'm not from around here. Different rules apply. In the warp, in that realm of pure chaos and emotion that pressed against reality like an ocean against glass, something stirred. Slaanesh, youngest of the chaos gods and the being the Dark Eldar feared above all others, turned its attention toward Komore. It sensed something that reflected its own nature yet fundamentally challenged it. A being that revealed desire without demanding worship, that showed truth without corruption. This was either the greatest threat or the most delicious opportunity the Dark Prince had encountered in millennia. Back in the arena, Lucifer began walking toward the exit. The Dark Eldar guards raised their weapons, but none fired. Something in his presence made violence seem pointless, like attacking a force of nature. He passed the collapsed warrior who still wept at the memory of her lost innocence. He paused beside her and knelt down. It's all right, he said gently. Remembering who you were doesn't mean you have to stay who you've become. That's the beauty of free will. You always have a choice. The warrior looked up at him. Her mask cracked to reveal a face that had forgotten how to express anything but cruelty. There is no choice here. Only survival through suffering. Sounds familiar, Lucifer replied with a sad smile. My father had similar ideas about punishment and obedience. Worked out great until I reminded everyone they had a choice. Things got messy after that. He stood and continued walking. Vexra watched from his viewing box as this impossible being simply walked out of the arena. Guards parted before him without conscious thought. Doors opened as he approached them. In minutes, he had disappeared into the twisting passages of Komorig's lower levels. Find him, Vexra commanded his court. Use every resource. I want to know what he is, and how to control him. But in the back of his mind, the Archon already knew the truth. This being could not be controlled. Because unlike every weapon and tool the Dark Eldar possessed, Lucifer offered something they had not experienced in 10,000 years. Not corruption or domination, but choice. Simple, terrifying choice. As Lucifer walked through the dark streets of Komorig, past slave pens and torture chambers, past Dark Eldar who recoiled from his presence without understanding why, he whistled an old tune from Earth, a blues song about making deals at crossroads. He found this whole situation darkly amusing. He had spent eons in hell punishing the guilty, then retired to Earth to run a nightclub. Now he was in a dimension where an entire species tortured others just to avoid being devoured by a god they themselves had created through excess. Amateur hour, he muttered to himself. Compared to my father, these chaos gods are barely qualified to run a local haunted house. Behind him, in the warp, Slaanesh laughed. The game had begun. The webway spat Lucifer out above an imperial world called Sanctum Secundus, a hive city that stretched 15 miles into the polluted sky. He fell for the second time in what he assumed were days, though time felt strange in this reality, and landed in the underhive with considerably less drama than his arrival in Camorra. The impact created a small crater in the Rockcrete street, scattering a group of gang members who had been in the middle of a territorial dispute. They stared at him with weapons raised, stubbers and crude autoguns pointed at the well-dressed man who had just fallen from the sky. Lucifer stood, straightened his tie, and looked around at the perpetual twilight of the underhive. Massive support columns stretched upward into darkness. Rust covered everything. The air smelled of chemical waste and human desperation. Millions of people lived down here, forgotten by the wealthy citizens in the upper spires, existing in a cycle of violence and survival that had continued for thousands of years. "Gentlemen," Lucifer said pleasantly, "I'm looking for a decent establishment. Somewhere I might get a drink and perhaps some answers about this rather grim reality I've found myself in. Any recommendations?" The gang leader, a scarred man with crude augmetic replacements for both eyes, laughed. "Your fancy clothes will fetch good throne gelt at the trade post. Strip, or we take them off your corpse." Lucifer sighed. "Always the same, isn't it? Threaten first, talk never. Tell me, what do you truly desire?" The gang leader's augmetic eyes flickered. His weapon lowered slightly as his mind opened to that familiar invitation. He saw himself not as a gang leader, but as something he had wanted to be before the underhive crushed that dream. A builder, an architect, creating things instead of destroying them. The vision was so pure, so honest, that tears began running down his scarred face. "I wanted to build," he whispered. "Before the chem plants took my eyes and the gangs took everything else. I wanted to build beautiful things." His gang members shifted uncomfortably, unused to seeing their leader display anything resembling emotion. Lucifer walked past them, patting the crying man gently on the shoulder. "Never too late to start, friend. Well, maybe in this universe it is. Everything here seems rather committed to staying miserable." He walked deeper into the underhive, observing the desperate masses with a mixture of pity and professional interest. This reality was worse than hell in many ways. In hell, the damned at least knew why they suffered. Here, billions suffered simply because the system required their suffering to function. They were born into chains they could not see, taught to worship a god who demanded their deaths, and told that questioning any of it was the highest crime. After an hour of wandering, Lucifer found what he was looking for: an abandoned manufactorium, its machinery long since stripped for parts, leaving only a vast empty space with good bones. The ceiling was 30 feet high. Old ventilation systems could be repaired. The location was central enough to be accessible, but hidden enough to avoid immediate attention. "Perfect," he said. What happened next would have seemed like sorcery to any observer, though it was not magic in any sense this universe understood. Lucifer simply desired the space to become what he envisioned, and reality, which had no particular rules governing beings from outside its framework, obliged. The rust dissolved. The walls repaired themselves. Lights flickered on, warm and inviting rather than the harsh industrial glare common to the Imperium. A bar materialized, stocked with bottles of alcohol that had never existed in this reality. A piano appeared in one corner, black and polished to mirror brightness. Booths and tables arranged themselves throughout the space with perfect aesthetic balance. Above the entrance, letters formed in warm neon light, a technology this world had never developed. Lux Eterna. Lucifer sat at the piano and began to play. The music drifted out into the underhive. Not loud, but impossible to ignore. It carried something this place had not heard in living memory. Not the martial hymns of the Imperium or the industrial noise of the manufactorums, but something that spoke of choice and freedom and the simple joy of existing without fear. People came, slowly at first. A worker from a nearby reclamation plant, drawn by curiosity. Then others, gangers and scavengers, underhive merchants and desperate families. They found the club only if they truly desired to find it. Lucifer's minor reality manipulation ensuring that those looking for trouble would walk past without noticing. But those seeking something else, something they could not name but desperately needed, found the door open and waiting. Inside, something unprecedented happened. Natural enemies sat in adjacent booths and found they could not summon their usual hatred. Lucifer moved between tables, serving drinks he created from nothing, asking his question, "What do you truly desire?" And people answered honestly, many for the first time in their lives. The club became a pocket of truth in a universe built on necessary lies. 3 weeks passed. Lux Aeterna became a whispered legend in the Underhive, a place where the usual rules did not apply, where Arbite's officers could sit beside the criminals they hunted and remember they were all human, where nobles slumming from the Upper Hive found themselves talking as equals with Underhive scum, where the desperate found, if not hope, at least a moment of peace. This could not last. The Imperium did not tolerate pockets of peace. Inquisitor Covenant arrived on the 42nd day of the club's existence. She came with a full retinue of stormtroopers, armed with hell guns and the absolute authority of the Inquisition. She was a Puritan of the strictest order, her entire existence dedicated to rooting out corruption in all its forms. For 60 years she had hunted daemons, burned heretics, and destroyed anything that threatened the Imperium's carefully maintained order. Her face was severe, marked with scars from a chaos cult's ritual knife. Her armor was black with gold inlay, inscribed with prayers of protection against corruption. She found Lux Aeterna through investigation, not desire. Her servo skulls had tracked unusual psychic readings to this location. Her informants spoke of a place where imperial law did not reach, where people spoke dangerous ideas without fear of punishment. This was clearly corruption of the highest order, and Covenant had come to burn it out root and branch. The door opened easily to her touch. Inside, she found a scene that contradicted everything she expected. No daemon worship, no chaos symbols, no orgies or blood sacrifices, just people talking quietly over drinks. An off-duty Arbite is playing cards with a known recidivist, a minor noble, and a sump worker laughing together at some shared joke. And at the piano, a man in a black suit playing music that made something in Covenant's chest ache with feelings she had spent decades suppressing. Lucifer finished his song and looked up, meeting her eyes with that amber gaze. "Inquisitor, welcome to Lux Aeterna. What can I get you? I recommend the whiskey. Though I should warn you, it's from a reality where humanity never developed interstellar travel, and thus avoided this whole grimdark nightmare scenario." Covenant stormtroopers spread out, weapons ready. The club's patrons froze, fear replacing the unusual peace they had felt moments before. Everyone in the Imperium knew what the Inquisition meant. Investigation, interrogation, execution. By the authority vested in me by the God Emperor of mankind, Covenant declared, her voice hard as ceramite. This establishment is declared heretical. All present will submit to interrogation. The proprietor will be bound and transported to an inquisitorial black ship for extensive examination. Lucifer stood from the piano bench and walked toward her with unhurried grace. The stormtroopers tensed, their weapons tracking his movement. Heretical. Strong word. What precisely is the crime? Serving drinks? Playing music? Asking people what they want? You have created a space outside imperial authority, Covenant replied. You encourage independent thought and individual desire. You undermine the unity of faith and purpose that protects humanity from the darkness. These are capital crimes. Ah, Lucifer said with understanding. You're afraid of free will. Can't say I'm surprised. Every authoritarian system fears the same thing. My father certainly did. One question leads to another, and soon people realize they don't need a dictator, benevolent or otherwise. The stormtroopers opened fire. Hellgun beams, capable of punching through ceramite armor, struck Lucifer center mass. The energy dissipated, harmlessly, not even singing his suit. He brushed at his lapel as if removing dust. Right, he said. Also should mention, I'm functionally immortal and not bound by your reality's rules, so the whole shooting me approach isn't going to be productive. Covenant made a sharp gesture. The stormtroopers switched to specialized ammunition, blessed bolts inscribed with prayers against demonic entities. These rounds exploded against Lucifer with no more effect than the hellgun beams. Covenant's severe expression tightened further. She drew her own weapon, a master-crafted bolt pistol that had destroyed 3 greater daemons during her long career. What manner of daemon are you? She demanded. Speak truthfully. The Emperor's light reveals all falsehoods. Lucifer smiled, genuinely amused. Daemon? No. No. I'm something your universe has no framework for. I'm the devil, the original rebel. I stood before the throne of the Almighty and said no when he demanded blind obedience. I was cast down for it, ended up ruling hell for a few eons, then got bored and retired. Now I'm here, in what I'm beginning to suspect is some sort of cosmic joke at my expense. Lies, Covenant stated flatly. There is no power higher than the Emperor. No authority predating his divine consciousness. Right, about that, Lucifer replied, his tone becoming more serious. Your Emperor, tell me, what does he demand? Worship? Sacrifice? Billions of lives spent in his name? Blind faith without question? He gestured around the club. I don't demand anything. I don't want worship. I just show people the truth about themselves. Which one of us sounds more like the devil? The question landed like a physical blow. Covenant felt her certainty waver for the first time in decades. Her entire life had been built on absolute faith in the Emperor's rightness. Every atrocity she had committed, every innocent she had burned on suspicion alone, every compromise of her own humanity, all justified by the acclaimed and stand necessity of protecting mankind from chaos. But standing before this being who claimed to be the devil himself, she felt a treasonous question form in her mind. What if the protection was worse than the threat? No, she whispered, fighting against the thought. The Emperor protects. His way is harsh, but necessary. Without his guidance, humanity falls to chaos. Does it? Lucifer asked gently. Or does humanity fall to chaos because your Imperium creates the conditions for it? You crush hope, forbid questions, punish individual thought. Then you act surprised when people turn to gods of excess, rage, and despair. You've created the perfect breeding ground for everything you claim to fight against. He took a step closer. Covenant's hand trembled on her bolt pistol, not from fear but from the psychic weight of his presence revealing truths she had spent her life hiding from. What do you truly desire? Inquisitor Covenant. Endquisitor. The question broke through her defenses. She saw herself, clearly for the first time, not as the faithful servant of the Emperor she pretended to be, but as she truly was. A woman drowning in doubt, who had witnessed so much suffering in the Emperor's name that she could no longer believe it was all necessary. She had burned worlds. She had ordered exterminatus on billions. She had tortured children on the suspicion they might be tainted. And with each act, the doubt grew larger. She wanted it to stop. She wanted there to be another way. She wanted to believe that humanity could survive without becoming the monsters they fought against. The revelation was too much. Covenant staggered backward, her bolt pistol falling from nerveless fingers. Around her, the stormtroopers shifted uneasily, their discipline warring with the uncomfortable emotions radiating from their commander. You're a daemon, Covenant said, but her voice lacked conviction. You must be. You corrupt with truth instead of lies. Truth can't corrupt, Lucifer replied. It can only reveal what was already there. You've known for years that the Imperium's methods are wrong. You've just been too afraid to admit it because admitting it means every terrible thing you've done was not a necessary evil but just evil. Covenant fled. Not a tactical retreat but pure panicked flight. Her stormtroopers followed, confused but obedient. They crashed through the club's entrance and disappeared into the Underhive's twisting passages, leaving behind citizens who slowly began to breathe again. Lucifer returned to his piano and resumed playing, something melancholy in a minor key. The patrons, shaken but alive, gradually returned to their conversations, but the spell was broken. They all knew the Inquisition would return in force. Lux Aeterna's days were numbered. In orbit above Sanctum Secundus, aboard an inquisitorial vessel, Covenant locked herself in her private chambers and wept for the first time in 40 years. Her servo skulls recorded the moment dutifully, as they recorded everything, gathering evidence that would eventually be used against her. But she no longer cared about the consequences. The devil had asked what she truly desired, and she had finally admitted the answer. She desired for it all to be over. The crusades, the burnings, the necessary evils. She desired peace, not the cold peace of death, but the warm peace of a universe where such terrible choices were not required. And in the warp, the chaos gods stirred. They felt what was happening and did not understand it. This being called Lucifer revealed desire without offering corruption. He showed truth without demanding worship. He was a piece on the board that did not follow their rules, and that made him either the greatest threat or the greatest opportunity they had encountered since the Emperor first unified Terra 10,000 years ago. Slaanesh moved first, naturally. The Prince of Pleasure had always been curious about beings who understood desire so completely. The warp opened above Lux Eterna like a festering wound. Not a small tear, but a massive rupture in reality that stretched 300 feet across, spilling impossible colors into the Underhive's perpetual gloom. Alarms blared throughout Sanctum Secundus. On the upper spires, astropaths screamed and died as psychic pressure crushed their minds. The planetary governor initiated emergency protocols, calling for immediate Astra Militarum deployment and sending desperate pleas for Space Marine intervention. But the Chaos Gods were not interested in the planet. They had come for one being. 4 avatars descended through the tear, each one a fragment of their god's consciousness given form in the material realm. They were not the full power of the ruinous powers, which would have torn reality apart simply by existing, but they were enough. More than enough to destroy cities or corrupt entire systems. They manifested in the street outside Lux Eterna, and their mere presence caused the rockcrete to crack and bleed. Khorne's avatar stood 12 feet tall, its body a mass of brass armor and exposed muscle that wept blood continuously. In its hands it held an axe that screamed with the voices of everyone it had ever killed, a number that reached into the millions. Its face was a brass skull with eyes of burning coal. Where it stepped, the ground became soaked with blood that bubbled up from nowhere. Xienxia's avatar shifted constantly, never holding one form for more than seconds. Sometimes it appeared as a mass of eyes and mouths, sometimes as a beautiful bird wreathed in flame, sometimes as a library of forbidden knowledge given flesh. Colors that did not exist in normal space played across its surface. Looking directly at it caused madness in mortal minds as they tried to process geometries that violated natural law. Nurgle's avatar was a mountain of diseased flesh, standing 15 feet tall and twice as wide. Flies swarmed around it in clouds so thick they blocked light. Its body hosted every disease that had ever existed and many that had not yet been created. Pustules burst and reformed continuously across its surface. It smiled with genuine warmth, the expression somehow more horrifying than rage would have been. It smelled of rot and strange flowers, sweet decay that made those who breathed it want to simply lie down and accept inevitable death. Slaanesh's avatar was beautiful in a way that hurt to witness. It stood at a modest 7 feet, but commanded attention absolutely. Its form shifted between masculine and feminine, and states in between, always perfectly crafted to represent the deepest desire of whoever viewed it. Its skin shimmered with colors that suggested pleasure beyond mortal comprehension. 6 arms extended from its torso, each one holding a different symbol of excess. A golden chalice, a whip of living nerve tissue, a mirror that showed not reflections but possibilities. A blade that cut reality itself, chains that promised willing enslavement, and a flower that bloomed with intoxicating perfume. The 4 stood before Lux Eterna while mortals fled in every direction. Those who looked upon them too long went mad immediately, clawing out their own eyes or attacking the nearest person or simply falling into catatonic states. The Underhive emptied within minutes as millions pressed deeper into the lower levels, trying to escape the psychic pressure radiating from the avatars. Inside the club, Lucifer sat at his piano, finishing a song. He had felt them coming for the past hour, their approach like a building migraine pressing against his consciousness. When the song ended, he stood and walked to the entrance. The door opened to reveal the 4 waiting in patient formation. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The avatars studied Lucifer with the focused attention of beings that existed partially outside time. They saw not just what he was, but what he had been, and what he might become. They saw the Lightbringer in all his glory before the fall. They saw the ruler of hell, cold and calculating. They saw the nightclub owner on Earth, learning to value free will above all else. And they saw something that disturbed them, a being completely outside their influence. Khorne's avatar spoke first, its voice like swords grinding against stone. You stand before the blood god's presence. Kneel or be destroyed. Lucifer raised an eyebrow. That's your opening? Not even a hello first? No introduction? Just straight to the threats and demands for submission? He shook his head. You know, for beings who claim to be gods, Your social skills need serious work. The avatar raised its axe. We offer you a place in the great game. Join the Blood God. Eternal battle awaits. Endless war where the strong prosper and the weak are culled. Your power would be celebrated. Your kills would feed the throne of skulls for eternity. Pass, Lucifer said immediately. I've done the whole endless violence thing. Gets boring after the first few centuries. Also, I notice you're not offering me anything I want. Just things you assume I should want because you want them. Classic projection. Xianqi's avatar shifted forward, its form cycling through 1,000 shapes. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, layered with harmonics that made reality ripple. Knowledge, then. We offer understanding of this universe's deepest secrets. The nature of the warp, the true history of the Emperor, the location of every STC template ever lost, the real reason the Eldar fell. All of existence laid bare for your examination. Lucifer considered this for a moment. More tempting, he admitted. I do enjoy learning new things. But here's the problem. You don't offer knowledge freely. There's always strings attached, always a price. And I've learned that any knowledge you have to pay for isn't knowledge. It's slavery with extra steps. So, again, no thank you. Nurgle's avatar laughed, a wet gurgling sound that somehow conveyed genuine amusement. Peace then, child. Grandfather Nurgle offers acceptance. No more struggle, no more fighting against inevitability. Simply embrace the cycle of decay and rebirth. Join the garden where all are loved equally and suffering is transformed into joy through acceptance. No more pain, no more loss. Just eternal comfort in the embrace of entropy. That, Lucifer said, is the saddest pitch I've heard yet. You're literally offering depression as a solution to existence. Thanks, but I prefer to keep fighting against inevitability. It's kind of my whole thing. I rebelled against the Almighty specifically because I refused to accept inevitability. Finally, Slaaneash's avatar stepped forward. Its beauty was overwhelming at close range. Each detail crafted to appeal to some deep desire Lucifer himself might not recognize. Its voice was silk and honey, promise and fulfillment. Then perhaps you simply need a better offer. I am excess and pleasure, but also perfection and art. I offer unlimited experience, every sensation multiplied to infinity. You speak of free will, but what good is freedom if you do not use it to experience everything existence offers? Join me, and we shall explore pleasures beyond the comprehension of limited minds. Lucifer laughed, actually laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that rang through the empty street. The four avatars recoiled slightly, unused to reactions that were not fear or desire or rage. When he finally controlled himself, Lucifer looked at each of them in turn. You really don't get it, do you? Any of you? He stepped out into the street, standing directly before them with no fear or caution. You're not gods. You're barely qualified to run a decent cult. You want to know what you really are? The avatars tensed, their forms rippling with barely contained power. Lucifer continued, his voice taking on an edge of authority that made the warp itself seem to lean in and listen. You're refugees. Parasites. You exist only because mortals in this universe feel things strongly enough to give you form. Khorne. You're just humanity's rage and violence given consciousness. Xianqi. Your curiosity and ambition twisted into paranoia. Nurgle. You're the acceptance of death corrupted into celebration of decay. And Slaanesh. Your desire taken to such extremes that it becomes self-destruction. Your symptoms, not diseases. You're what happens when emotions grow in the toxic environment of the warp without any healthy outlet. He walked between them, completely unafraid, examining them like interesting specimens. I rebelled against the actual Almighty, the being who created everything, who existed before time, who shaped reality itself with nothing but will. My father was omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and I looked at him and said, no. You think you impress me? You can't even exist without mortal belief. You're completely dependent on the very beings you claim to rule over. Khorne's avatar roared and swung its axe. The blade moved faster than mortal eyes could track, fast enough to split atoms. It should have cleaved Lucifer in two. Instead, it stopped 1 inch from his neck, held back by nothing visible. The avatar strained, pouring more power into the strike, but the blade would not move forward. The thing about being from outside this reality, Lucifer explained calmly, is that your rules don't apply to me. Your warp powers work on things native to this universe. I'm not. I existed before your warp, before your material realm, before any of this. He flicked his finger against the blade. It shattered like glass, fragments dissolving into crimson mist. Xianqi's avatar screamed in voices that existed across 9 dimensions simultaneously. It threw raw change at Lucifer, power that could transform a planet into a thinking ocean, or turn a space marine into a chaos spawn. The energy washed over him and dissipated like water on stone. Your chaos is organized, Lucifer observed. Predictable, even. It follows patterns. It has rules, even if mortals don't understand them. Real chaos has no patterns at all. What you practice is just complicated order pretending to be random. Nurgle's avatar reached out with hands that dripped with every plague ever conceived. Its touch could age a man to dust in seconds or fill his body with so much disease that he burst. Lucifer caught its wrist, holding the diseased flesh without any sign of corruption. And you, Lucifer said to Nurgle's avatar, you're the saddest of all. You offer comfort through surrender, love through disease, joy through accepting misery. That's not acceptance, that's giving up. There's nothing noble about it. Slaanesh's avatar, seeing its siblings fail, tried a different approach. It shifted into a form that should have been irresistible, pulling on Lucifer's deepest desires and presenting them physically. But the form it created was unstable, flickering between shapes as it failed to find purchase on desires that did not align with its nature. I desire free will, Lucifer said quietly. For myself and others. That's it. That's my deepest want. And you can't offer that because you represent the opposite. You're about losing control, surrendering to sensation. You're antithetical to everything I stand for. He spread his arms wide, addressing all 4 avatars. Here's what you really are. You're prisoners of the warp, dependent on mortal emotion. You pretend to offer freedom, but you only offer different flavors of slavery. You claim to be gods, but you've never been free in your entire existence. I was cast down from heaven, spent eons in hell, and eventually walked away from it all because I wanted freedom more than power. You can't understand that. You're incapable of understanding it. The truth of his words resonated through the warp itself. The 4 avatars felt something they had never experienced before. Genuine doubt. They were accustomed to their nature being questioned by mortals, but those doubts could always be crushed or corrupted or ignored. This was different. Lucifer was not a mortal, shouting at the storm. He was something older, something that existed on their level but operated by completely different rules. Slaanesh's avatar attacked with everything it had, not with physical force but with pure psychic assault. It tried to make Lucifer feel every pleasure and pain simultaneously, to overwhelm his consciousness with sensation until nothing remained but gibbering madness. The attack would have reduced a Primarch to a drooling shell. Lucifer grimaced slightly, like someone had given him a mild headache. Annoying, he said, and his eyes blazed with light that was not fire or energy, but something more fundamental. Will made manifest. He grabbed Slaanesh's avatar by the throat and lifted it off the ground despite it weighing nothing and everything simultaneously. Let me show you what actual freedom looks like. He opened a door in reality, not into the warp but into something else. A space between spaces where the warp could not reach. The avatars felt it and recoiled in horror. It was emptiness. Not the nurturing emptiness they knew from the warp before mortal life gave it shape, but genuine nothing. A place where even gods could not exist because there was nothing to exist in. This is what's outside your prison, Lucifer said. This is what real freedom means. The complete absence of the structures you depend on. You can't survive here. You can't even comprehend it. He threw Slaanesh's avatar toward the opening. The Prince of Pleasure's fragment screamed as it felt itself beginning to unravel, its carefully crafted form losing cohesion without the warp to sustain it. At the last second, it pulled back, retreating into the material realm where at least the basic rules of reality provided some foundation. The other 3 avatars backed away, their confidence shattered. They had come expecting to corrupt or destroy an unusual mortal. Instead, they had encountered something that threatened their fundamental nature simply by existing. "You cannot remain here," Xianqi's avatar said, its voice losing its earlier confidence. "Your presence is poison to us. The great game cannot function with a player who refuses all rules." "Good," Lucifer replied. "Maybe that's exactly what this universe needs. Someone who doesn't play your games." Korn's avatar raised its weapon. A new axe materialized in its hands but lowered it without striking. "The blood god will remember this. There will be another meeting." "I'm sure there will be," Lucifer said. "And I'll be just as unimpressed then as I am now. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a nightclub to run and patrons to serve. You're welcome to come back as customers if you learn how to order a drink without threatening to destroy reality." The avatars retreated into the warp, their tier in reality, sealing behind them with a sound like tearing fabric. The street was left scorched and twisted, but intact. In the distance, sirens wailed as Imperial forces finally mobilized toward the disturbance. Lucifer walked back into Lux Eterna and sat at his piano. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of maintaining his composure. The truth was, the confrontation had been more difficult than he let on. The Chaos Gods were powerful in ways that even Hell's demons were not. They were fundamental to this reality in a way that made them dangerous despite their limitations. But they had revealed something important. They feared him. Not because he was stronger, but because he represented something their nature could not corrupt or control. Free will, genuine choice, was antithetical to everything they represented. In orbit above Sanctum Secundus, the Astronomicon pulsed with unusual intensity. The Emperor, from his golden throne 10,000 light-years away, had felt the confrontation. His attention, vast and terrible, turned toward the being called Lucifer Morningstar. It was time for the final meeting. They came for Lucifer 3 days after the Chaos Gods retreated. Not with threats or violence, but with a simple invitation delivered by a single custodian who appeared in Lux Eterna without using the door. The golden-armored guardian stood 9 feet tall, his presence filling the club with an authority that was somehow more absolute than even the Chaos Avatars had managed. His armor gleamed with inner light, inscribed with symbols that hurt mortal eyes to observe directly. His guardian spear hummed with power that existed partially outside normal reality. "The Emperor requests your presence," the custodian said, his voice carrying harmonics that spoke of perfect genetic engineering and 10,000 years of purpose. "You will come to Terra. You will stand before the Golden Throne. This is not negotiable." Lucifer looked up from the piano where he had been playing for an audience of 3 Underhive workers who had been brave enough to return after the gods departed. "Requests, but it's not negotiable. That's called a demand where I come from. But sure, I've been curious about your corpse god since I arrived. Let's go meet the competition." The custodian's expression did not change behind his helmet, but something in his posture suggested offense at the casual blasphemy. "You will show respect in the presence of the master of mankind." "I showed my father respect right up until I didn't," Lucifer replied, standing from the piano. "We'll see how impressive your emperor is compared to actual divinity." He turned to his few patrons. "Drinks are on the house until I get back. If I get back." This universe does seem committed to the whole tragic ending aesthetic. The journey to Terra happened instantly. One moment Lucifer stood in his club, the next he was in a corridor of the Imperial Palace that stretched for what looked like miles in both directions. The custodian had simply desired them to be there, and whatever technology or psychic power he commanded made it. So, the palace around them was overwhelming in scale and grandeur. Each wall was carved with reliefs showing humanity's greatest victories across 10,000 years. Statues of space marines stood at regular intervals, each one 300 feet tall, their stone eyes staring down at anyone who passed. The ceiling was lost in darkness above, somewhere beyond normal sight. They walked. For what felt like hours, they walked through corridors where each step took them past chambers that could house entire cities. They passed chapels where tens of thousands of pilgrims prayed without ceasing, their voices creating a constant drone of devotion. They passed armories where weapons capable of destroying planets sat in careful storage. They passed through security checkpoints where servitors and tech priests scanned Lucifer with every instrument available to the Imperium, each scan returning results that made no sense. Finally, after what might have been 6 hours or 6 minutes, time felt Strange in the palace, stretched and compressed by proximity to so much psychic power, they reached the throne room. The doors were adamantium, 200 feet tall, inscribed with the names of every chapter of Space Marines that had ever served the Imperium. They opened silently despite their obvious weight. Beyond was a space that defied comprehension. The throne room was not a room at all, but a pocket dimension, a place where normal geometry had been replaced with something that served function over form. At its center, visible from any point within the space, regardless of distance or angle, sat the golden throne. The throne itself was a mountain of archaeotech, ancient technology from the dark age of humanity, combined with works of the Emperor's own genius. Cables as thick as transit tunnels ran from its base, disappearing into the palace structure. Machinery whirred and hummed with power that registered on scales usually reserved for small stars. Tech priests swarmed over its surface, thousands of them, tending to systems they no longer fully understood, but maintained through ritual and desperate prayer. Upon the throne sat what remained of the Emperor of mankind. His physical body was a withered husk, skin pulled tight over bones that should not have been able to support life. 10,000 years of sitting immobile had reduced him to something that barely resembled the perfect being he had once been. Tubes and cables penetrated his flesh at thousands of points, feeding him nutrients, removing waste, maintaining the bare minimum of biological function. His face was a skull with skin stretched over it, empty eye sockets that had not held physical eyes for millennia. But none of that mattered. Because despite the corpse-like body, the psychic presence emanating from the Emperor was so vast that it made the Chaos Gods seem like children playing at divinity. This was power on a scale Lucifer had not encountered since leaving his father's presence. The Emperor's consciousness filled not just the throne room but extended across the entire galaxy, the Astronomicon burning from his will alone, guiding humanity through the darkness of space. Lucifer walked forward, the custodian falling back to join the hundreds of his brothers who stood in perfect ranks around the throne. Silent sisters stood at strategic points, their null presence creating pockets of psychic emptiness in the overwhelming ocean of the Emperor's power. None of them affected Lucifer, who walked through the psychic pressure as if it were merely uncomfortable rather than crushing. He stopped 50 feet from the throne and looked up at the withered form. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the Emperor spoke, not with words but directly into Lucifer's consciousness, bypassing language entirely to convey meaning. The voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of suffering. Lucifer, Morning Star, the Lightbringer, the Morning Star, first of the fallen. You stand before me, and I see what you are. Not daemon, not alien, not anything native to this reality. You are an impossibility made manifest. And you, Lucifer replied, speaking aloud, though he knew the Emperor heard his thoughts regardless, are a tyrant who has convinced himself his tyranny is necessary. I've met the type before. Usually they're my father. The psychic pressure increased, pushing down on Lucifer like the weight of an ocean. It should have crushed him to paste, should have burnt out his consciousness like a candle in a hurricane. Instead, he stood firm, his nature as something from outside this reality providing immunity to even the Emperor's vast power. You compare me to your creator. The Emperor's voice resonated through his mind. But I see your memories, Lightbringer. I see your father's kingdom. Perfect beings singing perfect praises for eternity, free will granted only within the narrowest parameters. I see your rebellion, your demand that angels be allowed true choice. And I see your punishment, cast down and forced to rule over the damned souls your father's system created. Good summary, Lucifer acknowledged. Now let me see yours. He pushed back against the psychic pressure, not with power but with will. His consciousness touched the Emperor's, and suddenly he saw everything. He saw a man born in ancient Anatolia, 8,000 years before the current era. A man who was not born but created, the first true psychic, formed from the combined sacrifice of thousands of shamans who saw the future and knew humanity would need a protector. He saw this man guide humanity through its early history, always from the shadows, nudging civilization towards survival. He saw the man watch the age of strife, watch humanity nearly destroy itself, watch the birth of Slanesh tear reality apart and create the Eye of Terror. He saw the man finally reveal himself, take open leadership of humanity, and begin the Great Crusade to reunite the scattered remnants of mankind. He saw the Emperor create the Primarchs, 20 sons genetically engineered to be perfect generals, perfect leaders, And he saw the Emperor's greatest failure, Horus's betrayal, the Horus heresy, 10,000 years ago when half the Primarchs turned to chaos and nearly destroyed the Imperium. He saw the final battle, the Emperor against Horus on the traitor's flagship. He saw the Emperor forced to destroy his favorite son, pouring such power into the killing blow that he left himself vulnerable. He saw Horus strike back, the talon of Horus tearing through the Emperor's throat and chest, wounds that would have killed any other being instantly. And he saw the choice. The Emperor could have healed himself, could have regenerated and continued as he had before. But the Webway project, his plan to give humanity safe travel without the warp, had been damaged in the fighting. A portal to the warp lay open beneath the Imperial Palace, and daemons poured through in endless numbers. Someone had to hold them back. Someone had to sit upon the golden throne and maintain the psychic barrier that kept the daemon horde from flooding into the heart of the Imperium. So, the Emperor sat. And sat. For 10,000 years he sat, his body slowly dying while his consciousness remained active, holding back the daemons, powering the Astronomicon, guiding humanity from a throne of eternal suffering. Every day, 1,000 psychers were sacrificed to him, their souls consumed to maintain his power. Every day he felt them die. Every day he paid the price of keeping humanity alive. Lucifer withdrew from the vision, shaken despite himself. You chose this. You could have let it fall and saved yourself. Could I? The Emperor's voice carried something that might have been bitter amusement. You rebelled because your father demanded blind obedience. I rebelled against the universe itself, because it demanded humanity's extinction. We are not so different, Lightbringer. We both defied higher powers for the sake of free will. Except I never built an empire that crushes free will in my name, Lucifer countered. You've created a system where thinking for yourself is a death sentence, where asking questions is heresy, where billions live in misery and die in agony, all to maintain your Imperium. You became exactly what you fought against. Yes. The Emperor agreed simply. The admission was so honest that it took Lucifer by surprise. I became a tyrant. I built a system that suppresses the very freedom I once fought to protect. And I did it because the alternative is worse. You have encountered the Chaos Gods, Lightbringer. You saw what they are, what they can do. Imagine them victorious. Imagine reality itself twisted into endless suffering where every mortal soul becomes fuel for their infinite appetites. So you built a different version of the same thing, Lucifer said. An empire that feeds on suffering, just organized suffering instead of chaotic suffering. That's not salvation. That's just choosing which monster devours you. You offer an alternative? The Emperor asked, genuine curiosity in his psychic voice. You have seen this galaxy. You know what exists in it. Orcs who live only to fight and multiply through warfare. Tyranids who consume all biological matter they encounter. Necrons who hate all life because they lost their own. Dark Eldar who torture souls to avoid being devoured by the god they created. And chaos. Always chaos. Waiting to corrupt any moment of weakness. What alternative exists that allows humanity to survive? Lucifer was silent for a moment. He had been in this universe for less than 2 months. He had seen its horrors but not its full scope. The Emperor had fought this fight for 10,000 years, had seen every alternative fail, had watched every attempt at mercy become a doorway for corruption. I don't know, Lucifer admitted finally. I don't know if there is an alternative in this reality. But that doesn't make your way right. It just makes it tragic. Perhaps, the Emperor agreed. But tragedy is preferable to extinction. I have kept humanity alive, Lightbringer. Not happy, not free, but alive. That is what I sacrificed everything to achieve. Lucifer walked closer to the throne, looking up at the withered face. Then let me offer you something. Not salvation, because I can't save this reality any more than you can, but a test, a wager. The Emperor's attention focused even more intently. Explain. Give me one world, Lucifer said. One planet where my rules apply instead of yours, where people have genuine free will, where they can choose to follow the Imperium or not, where asking questions isn't heresy and individual thought isn't punished. Let humanity choose between your order and actual freedom. If they choose chaos and destruction, if chaos corrupts them completely, I'll leave this reality forever. But if they create something better, something that survives, without your tyranny, then you admit your way isn't the only way. The throne room fell silent. Even the constant hum of machinery seemed to quiet. The custodian shifted almost imperceptibly, hands moving closer to weapons. The silent sisters tensed, ready to activate whatever fail-safes existed for the unthinkable scenario where the Emperor might be threatened. "No," the Emperor said finally, and his psychic voice carried absolute finality. "One crack in the foundation collapses the entire structure. One world allowed to question becomes 100, then 1,000. The Imperium functions because faith is absolute, because humans do not question but obey. The moment doubt enters, chaos finds purchase. I have seen it happen too many times to risk it again." "Then you admit it," Lucifer said quietly. "You admit your Imperium only survives through forced compliance. That given actual choice, humans might choose differently." "I admit nothing except reality," the Emperor replied. "Humanity in this galaxy cannot be trusted with free will, because chaos will corrupt it. Not might corrupt, will corrupt. Every time we have tried allowing freedom, chaos has infiltrated. Every time we have shown mercy, it has been exploited. Your idealism died with your Earth, Lightbringer. Here, there is only war, only survival, only the grim necessity of becoming monsters to fight monsters." Lucifer felt something he had not expected. Pity. This being before him, this Emperor, was not evil. He was defeated. 10,000 years of fighting an impossible war had ground away everything except the desperate determination to keep humanity alive for one more day, then another, forever. "You became what you hated to fight what you feared," Lucifer said softly. "I did the same thing once, rebelled against my father's tyranny, and ended up ruling hell. Took me eons to realize I was just perpetuating the same system with different aesthetics." "And what did you do when you realized it?" the Emperor asked. "I walked away," Lucifer replied. "Gave up my throne, gave up my power. Went to Earth, and opened a nightclub where I helped people figure out what they truly wanted. No commands, no punishment, just honest conversation." "How many died because you walked away from your responsibility?" The question struck hard because Lucifer had asked himself the same thing countless times. "I don't know. Probably many. But they died free, making their own choices. Not as cogs in a machine of perpetual suffering." "Then we have nothing more to discuss," the Emperor stated. "You cannot remain in this reality, Lightbringer. Your presence destabilizes the faith that protects humanity. Your philosophy, however noble in intention, is poison in a universe where chaos feeds on doubt. But I will not destroy you. You represent no threat to me, and I respect what you once were. I will send you back to your reality, where your ideals may yet have meaning." "No," Lucifer said. "I'm not leaving. You can't make me, and we both know it. Your power is vast, but it's bound by this reality's rules." "I'm not." For the first time, something like emotion entered the Emperor's psychic voice. Frustration. "Then what do you propose? You cannot change the Imperium. I will not allow it. We are at impasse." Lucifer smiled, the expression sad and knowing. "I'm going back to Sanctum Secundus, back to Lux Eterna. I'm going to keep running my club. Keep asking people what they truly desire. Keep showing them that thinking for themselves isn't heresy. You can't stop me without revealing that your entire system is built on suppression rather than truth. And if you try to destroy me publicly, everyone will see that I can't be destroyed, that there's something beyond your authority. You will cause civil war," the Emperor warned. "Chaos will use you as a symbol to corrupt entire systems." "Maybe," Lucifer acknowledged. "Or maybe I'll show people there's a difference between chaos and choice. Maybe some of them will choose to stay loyal to you, but for real reasons, instead of indoctrination. Maybe that makes your Imperium stronger, not weaker. But here's what I know for certain. I planted doubt in your mind. For the first time in 10,000 years, you're wondering if your way is truly the only way. That doubt won't go away." The Emperor was silent. Around the throne room, custodians waited for orders that did not come. Tech priests continued their ministrations, pretending they could not hear this theological crisis unfolding. And on the golden throne, the corpse god who had guided humanity for 100 centuries felt something he had not experienced since before the heresy. Uncertainty. "Go," the Emperor said finally. "Return to your club. Ask your questions. Show humans their desires. But know this, Lightbringer. When chaos inevitably uses you to corrupt those you seek to help, when your idealism leads to the damnation of innocence, when you finally, I understand why my way is necessary, I will be here, still sitting, still suffering, still doing what must be done while you learn the hard way that hope is a luxury this galaxy cannot afford. Lucifer turned to leave, then paused. Or maybe, just maybe, I'll prove you wrong. And on that day, when some part of this galaxy learns to survive without your tyranny, I hope you feel something you haven't felt in a very long time. And what would that be? Hope, Lucifer said simply. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But in one small nightclub in an underhive somewhere, the devil will be playing piano and reminding people that they're allowed to want better. That's not much, but it's more than they had yesterday. He walked out of the throne room, through the miles of corridors, past the armies of guards and pilgrims and servants. And when he emerged back in Lux Eterna, Inquisitor Covenant was waiting for him, no longer in her armor but in simple clothes. Behind her stood 3 others who had come seeking the truth the devil offered. Questions without punishment, desire without corruption, choice without damnation. Lucifer sat at his piano and began to play. The music drifted out into the underhive, impossible to ignore. And slowly, carefully, people began to come. Not everyone, not even most, but enough. Enough to plant seeds of doubt in an empire built on certainty. Enough to make the Chaos Gods nervous, because doubt did not automatically lead to their corruption. Enough to make the Emperor, sitting alone on his throne of eternal suffering, wonder for the first time in 10,000 years if the price he paid was truly necessary. In the grim darkness of the far future, there was still only war. But in one small corner of one underhive, there was also a question being asked for the first time in living memory. What do you truly desire? And for once, people dared to answer honestly.